human diversity, and that people with disabilities, like non-disabled people, bring gifts, have issues. When you look at disability from a dimensional perspective, and you look at dimensions such as mental health, dimensions such as physical capability, dimensions such as facility in learning how to read, for instance, that those things are all dimensional, and we all exist somewhere on those dimensions. And what happens too often with people with disabilities or children with disabilities in the educational context, too many people see disability first and don't look at all the ways in which people function in different dimensions. And I see that changing very slowly. And I just read a dissertation, wonderful dissertation here of a student, a doctoral student here at Harvard. Her name is Jen Zulli. She did a terrific dissertation on low-track English classes. And in those low-track English classes are a lot of kids who have learning disabilities. And on one level it was really sad to read, because the children had internalized by ninth grade a conception of themselves that was very, very negative, that was, I think, largely produced by the schools. And that was reinforced by their placement in classes that had very low expectations for them. So we still have a long way to go. Who would I see as change agents is the question I was asked as it relates to this issue. From my perspective, being in the world of education of children with disabilities, there is no question that the power of parents has been huge in terms of changing paradigms. Back in the 50s and 60s, when parents of children with intellectual disabilities began to organize schools because they didn't want to send their kids to institutions, and believing, for instance, that their children could learn how to read and their children could learn the other things that other children were learning in school, maybe not at the same rate, but were capable of learning. That was a radical concept in the 50s and 60s that was rejected by the medical profession, that was rejected by the education profession, but was a challenge that were largely parents of children with Down syndrome and other types of disabilities, intellectual disabilities, challenged. And by the 70s, it was clear that there were lots of children with, even back then, with intellectual disabilities who were getting some form of education, usually segregated, but still better than no education. And I taught at one of these schools back in the early 70s, 1971. I student taught at one of these schools, Our Lady of Mercy School in Worcester, and our kids all learned how to read. And the nuns, run by nuns at that time, believed in the capability of these children. Well, that was radical back then. Well, that's now mainstream. But that notion was pushed first and foremost by parents with allies among educators. And that continues to be a very strong force in the area of education of children with disabilities, the power of parents. Increasingly, I see people with disabilities playing a much greater role in the education sphere. People like Judy Heumann, for instance, former assistant secretary, my boss under the Clinton administration, and many, many people who were active in the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, people who have disabilities themselves, people in independent living centers, like Marka Bristow in Chicago, people like that who have taken an active interest in the education of kids with disabilities. And I see that role being increasingly played by adults with disabilities. But one of the other things I'm seeing is that role being increasingly played by kids with disabilities. There's a great piece in the Boston Globe this week about a first grader with cerebral palsy at the Henderson School. I love this story. I knew this story because the principal called me when it happened. He said, good friend of mine, a first grader wanting to have a say in who the second grade teacher would be that the school was about to hire, and wanted to be involved in the interviewing process to make sure that the second grade teacher who they were about to hire would know about how to educate children with disabilities and have the right attitudes towards him. He's in the first grade. And I said to myself, boy, this is a changed world. And that I'm going to watch this little guy because he's going to be something.